This is the SoundLab at Home, Australia's top rock program with all the best guests from coast to coast and around the world. Here's your host, music industry veteran, director of the SoundLab Music School, and author of Why Learn Music, Melbourne's Princess of Rock, Leah Gallin.
Simon Cotter of AT Guitars and Amplification is Australia's premier music gear repairer. His clients include musicians from some of the biggest rock bands on the planet. He joins me to share his experiences on the SoundLab at Home. Hello Simon, welcome to the SoundLab at Home. Thank you for being my guest. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Leah?
I'm very well. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Do you want to tell us about yourself?
I'm the only guy here at AT Guitars and Amps. Guitar amp repairs, guitar repairs, any sort of guitar, bass repairs, effects pedals, and just if there's a touring band that happens to need something in an emergency, race out and do that as well. 20 years now, 80s has been running. I was in electronic warfare in the Department of Defense before starting this, and went to uni and studied electronics. And so I did 7 years at Bellman, everything from sanding necks to designing the bodies in 3D to running the CNC machine to putting in the frets to everything. So I think I was still at Bellman when I met you, I think.
Right.
Yeah, well, no, it would have been. It was late 2005, started 2006. I started working for AMI.
As the wholesalers, my family business, Australian Musical Imports, used to be distributors for Orange. Yeah, so for those who don't know, obviously an RA is a return item. So the wholesaler will obviously have to cover warranties. Simon used to help us, because it was for all of the retailers, obviously, that we supplied to for the country. So, yeah.
What amps did you had? Orange? Oh, and Trace Elliot?
We had Trace Elliot very early on. We did Orange for, well over a decade, I reckon.
Yeah, lots of Orange.
Lots of Orange. I mean, there was a ton of stock, you know, because I handled the AR exclusively for a while.
I think you also called me one day because I ended up doing a long time ago, from memory, at Jimmy Eat World when they were in Australia.
Yep.
He had Orange, but he brought his own amp. He didn't want backline, and the amp blew up. Had to go down, and I collected the amp at like 1 a.m. Because they wanted it for Soundwave the next day. For some reason, he just didn't want a backline one. It just had to be his one.
That sounds familiar. I think I remember handling that one. It was a bit of a nightmare, and you came and saved the day for us, which was great. With Soundwave, we particularly did a lot of Orange. There were just tons of bands on the Soundwave bill that were using the gear, and I think they did 6 Soundwaves. Was it? I went to every one, I think.
No, a blur.
Yeah, it turns into a blur because there was so many bands, and yeah, just a lot of gear that was being used. And then in the end, we sold off a lot of it, scratch and dent and that sort of thing. So people obviously would have picked up a lot of bargains for actual stuff that had been touring around, you know, whatever it was in terms of endorsements. Whenever anybody rang about an Orange amplifier, wanting it for in the country, we'd bend over backwards and we'd do it for them for nothing.
I mean, the house always looked a bit ragged, but he's always, I mean, after every tour, we'd get them all made back to scratch again. So they were always in great shape. So whoever bought them, yeah, the insides were great. Always looked after.
Bit of Tolex, you know, rough here and there, but that's all right. It's part and parcel of it, isn't it?
They charge thousands for relicking now.
I remember my old man didn't want to fork out for road casing. So, yeah, they used to get shipped out to the artists in cardboard boxes, and they'd be backstage. And people would just be like, what is with this cheapskate wholesaler that doesn't care about, you know, got so many Orange amplifiers on the road. And I think it caused a bit of buzz because it was so different that...
It was that time too, though, like the late 2000s, early 2000s, Orange just became one of the it brands, like just the right time for it as well. It's like I remember when I first started, it wasn't that popular, like you'd see it around, but by 2010, 2011, it was like so many people using Orange.
Do you do repair work particularly for retailers? Do you want to get that out there?
Yeah, do lots of retailers all across Melbourne. Like if you have a Blackstar product, a Music Man product, a Mark-based product, a Dark Glass product, or a Fender, a EVH, a Gretsch, Gibson and Orange come here as well. Pretty much other than Alpha that do their own, yeah, most, if the shop has those brands, they'll end up here. I do some direct with the companies as well, like I do Heritage directly for Heritage, Taylor directly for Taylor, Wampler Effects directly for them. Yeah, it's a mixed bag. I mean, I guess in this business, if you want to survive, you've got to cover a lot of bases.
What are some of the bands that you've worked with doing repairs?
Jimmy Eat World, worked for Kaiser Chiefs, Arctic Monkeys, repaired an amp for John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, George Lynch, The Sword. I did a couple tours with Living Colour. It's kind of weird. I went to NAMM to a studio there, asked me, I probably know more people there than I know here in the industry. They were like, when you come over to NAMM, do you want to repair amps in the studio for people and mod stuff? And I was like, all right. So I took a little bag of tools over and was repairing in a studio in LA. And then on the last day of NAMM, or the Saturday of NAMM, I get a call going, do you want to go fix Richie Kotzen's amps? I was like, okay. So we drove out to Richie Kotzen's house on Monday and did 7 amps for him. Just fluked, having taken all the right components just to get through that. That could have gone terribly, but it went great. We got everything done, got to hang out. Then lots of obviously Australian bands like King Parrot and, you know, one of my favourite Australian bands, Closure in Moscow, brings their stuff here. That's pretty cool. Back in the day, did Magic Dirt. Pretty lucky for someone at the bottom end of the world. I'm not really connected to anything down here, so pretty happy with what I've been able to achieve.
Hi, I'm Leah Gallin, the Managing Director of the SoundLab Music School here in Parrot. This is our wonderful venue. We've been here for over 10 years. Now we've got the 2 options. We've got our fantastic teachers live back at the venue, or we've been running our lessons online via Zoom. So whether you're after online or live lessons, contact us today.
So do you want to tell us a bit about John Paul Jones was one of your clients? That's interesting. I met him briefly once. It's a bit of a legend.
He was amazing. Yeah, it was a big 900 watt SWR, really horrible amp to work on, really dangerous. All the FETs sat right on the top, so you had to put your hands past them to get to the part to repair. That's a lot of current. That's going to mess you up. They shipped the amp from Western Australia to me, got in at like 5 p.m, something here. So I figured, well, I got to work on it. And it was needed for the next morning at 10 a.m. I was working on it all night. And then at that time, SWR was, they probably still are owned by Fender. I got a call from Fender America just saying, if you can't fix the amp, don't give it back to him. Like, just don't. We have to be right for John Paul Jones. And I'm just like, I'll be right. Well, how does he run it? You know, so basically, because I'm a guitar player as well, you know, I test every amp actually playing as well to make sure it sounds right, you know, as well as electronically looks right. And they're like, oh yeah, he puts it on half and he runs it really hard and stuff. I'm like, oh man, this is 900 watts. And so I ended up, you know, again, I had to test it all through the night. I blew out 2 speakers and a couple of loads, just diming this thing to make sure that it was 100%. Get to the gig the next day to give it back to him, and I go to give it to Hugh Manson, who makes Manson guitars, was his tech. And he's like, yeah, go put it in. I'm like, okay. So we go and install it in the rack, and he's like, all right, I'll test it out. And he goes, you know, put it on. So I'd been told he runs it on half. So he ran it into an 810 cab, so I put it on half. And Hugh's just standing there on the front of the stage, and he didn't even really hit a note. He kind of rubbed his thumb against the low E, and it just made this massive. He's just jumped around. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. I was told it half. He goes, no, he runs it on 1. I'm like, what? Like 1 on the volume. Okay. And it was great. Like, we got it done. It was all working. And then John came, and I got to hang out with him for like 5 hours or so. Like, he was just this sweet old dude that no ego, just super relaxed, just super chilled, you know. And I'm like, this is John Paul Jones? Anyway, so hanging out for ages. And of course, it's my job. So I'm like, I don't go, can I have photos and all that? Yeah, so finally got to when he wanted to do a sound check, and he walks out on stage, and there's only me and Andy from Maton Guitars in the venue, like out the front of the stage. And he starts the bass and he hits a couple notes and it cuts out dead. I'm like, oh no. And I start backing up. Like, there's nowhere to go. It's like, it's just a big empty floor, and I'm backing up trying to go into the shadows, thinking the amp's died, and it was a patch lead. So he bumped a patch lead out of a pedal. So the amp worked fine, and yeah,
I met him backstage at Blues Fest. He was playing with Seasick Steve and my mates are in Wolf Mother, and they did an impromptu performance with Seasick, and he was playing bass for him. Yeah,
spending all that time with him and just like so chilled and such a nice bloke. And I was like, oh, okay. Not the person who walked on stage. Lots of people talk about rock stars that just there's something else in them, or there's something that switches on. Or he appeared a foot taller. He was authoritative. He had a charisma. It was like, that's not the person I just spent hours with. That was one of the first times I've gotten to work with technically rock stars and stuff. He was one of the few that was like, oh, that's just different. Like there's something commanding about him, and on stage was, yeah, that was mind blowing.
He does a lot of collaborative projects as well. I mean, Them Crooked Vultures is one of my favourites. I remember.
That's what the tour was.
Was it? Yeah, that was fantastic. I saw that show at Festival Hall in Melbourne.
That's the one that I got the amp running for.
Right. Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bloody great show. I mean, he's just a genius. I thought that was one of the better super groups that they've been.
Yeah, like the amount of instruments that John just played in that show alone was, his backline area was almost everyone else's added together. It was crazy. So yeah, that was a great show.
And he's an all-round good guy as well, and that's the thing, and it's being humble when you're from one of the biggest rock bands in the universe. So yeah, we were backstage and there were, some groupies sort of hanging around trying to make contact with Andrew Stockdale from Wolf Mother, and they didn't know obviously who he was because no one was bothering him, and he was sort of, they were drinking and carrying on, and he was trying to get himself water bottles, and I sort of, pushed the girls out the way and he said, "Can I get you a water, man?" And he's like, "Oh, thanks," because I was like, no one knew who he was. Like, it was just unbelievable. He couldn't even get to his own rider to get a water. It was funny because I was working for Gibson, obviously, had my Gibson business card with Jimmy Page with the twin neck on it, introduced myself to Seasick. He was quite funny because he's like, oh, this, Southern American accent. He said, oh, yeah, it's great that you work for Gibson, but I'm not interested, sweetheart, because, he just plays like a box with a string and all sorts of stuff. So I think what had happened was John Paul played with them because I think Lenny Kravitz was in town and was friends with the Wolf Mother guys. Lenny put him in touch with Seasick to play with him at Blues Fest, and then Lenny knew the Wolf Mother guys, so they got asked to come up and do a couple of songs. There were a few major celebs that were hanging around in Byron recording and stuff like that at the time. So Living Colour, so that's an interesting one because Doug Wimbish is a dear friend of my old man's, and they did a thing with John Entwistle from The Who for Trace Elliot amplifiers back in the late 90s. Yeah, just sort of before John Entwistle died. I met Doug Wimbish actually when they Living Colour played Soundwave.
Oh, yeah.
Hung out with him and he remembered my old man. He was great to have a chat to. He'd met my mum as well. It was quite cute.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely bloke. And then obviously they came out again more recently. They've had an opportunity to see them a couple of times. They're a very interesting band that a lot of people probably don't know about, but their music sort of influenced a lot of stuff. So what was it like working with them?
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing. I would say the best thing about him is they're four really good guys. Again, no ego, and it's kind of funny. I mean, their career's been so long. If you actually listen to a lot of their albums, it's probably more relevant now than it's even ever been. But yeah, just four great guys up to the point they know my wife and kid, and when they're in town, they just catch up. It was a hell of a gig. I mean, that was Vernon himself runs 2 Messer heads, a Fender combo. One tour there was a Kemper and a Line 6 Helix, plus 2 extra pedal boards, plus a mixing desk so that he can mix it with foot pedals on the fly. That's just Vernon. Then I got to go to Doug's side and we would wire up Doug's pedal board, every cable, every day. Pedal boards probably 2 or 3 meters long, 600 wide. Still loves his Trace Elliots. Their music can be quite intense, and if I felt really lucky that, if you go and see it for 2 hours, you just come out like, oh my God, like I just got hit with so many things. And getting to watch it, do 2 tours and watch it every night. By the end, it was like, you just realize, like, it's hard rock and everything, but you realize how jazz it is. The music's like a conversation within itself. So it was really, really amazing just to get to see it and watch it every night up close. And again, it was made so much easier because they were just such good guys.
So you're the fix-it guy, basically.
Pretty much. That's actually what I love doing the most. I love the fact that one day you're routing out a guitar to put new things in fix a broken headstock, or the next tube amp's died. Got to figure it out. You learn it, figure it out, and fix it.
That must be a very satisfying thing to be repurposing. These days we live in such a disposable society where we just, use it once, chuck it away. If it's broken, don't fix it. So, yes, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the old instruments and stuff, just can't whack them back together because usually there'll be so many stress cracks or things in them that you can't just treat them rough or whatever. You have to fix them the right way so that it doesn't cause more problems. The whole disposable thing is you've hit my old man nerve. Now it's just like, Apple's changed the world. Back when AMI, when I started them, it was kind of legal that you had to have spare parts. That was part of the deal. You imported something, you had to stock spare parts. And Apple came along and just goes, no, we're just not going to repair anything. So everyone else kind of went, well, if they don't have to repair, why do I? And people don't stock spare parts now. They just make them so they're glued, like inside they'll literally pour glue across components so you can't repair them. It's like you have to replace a board like a computer or something. I have a 72 Marshall just there. It's like a February 72. And the only reason I bought that is the transformers. That's a massive part of the tone. Electrolytic capacitors, they die after, or they get crappy after 10, 15 years. Other components will go out of tolerance and everything. When people go, oh, all old amps or all old things are great, it's just such rubbish. Those components had plus or minus 20% tolerance. So worst case scenario, if we had two of them and one went all minus 20 and one went all positive 20, those amps are 40% different. So they're going to sound very different. So if you plug into one, you might plug it in the most amazing one ever, and then you're like, well, that's what I want. I want a 72 Marshall. But you get up another one and it could sound horrendous. And of course, sound's an opinion. It's not a fact. It could just sound horrendous to you. But the thing I know is transformers are pretty reliable. For me, Marshalls up to about 75 have a real sweetness in the top end. After that, they started going more towards the 800 transformers that were later to come. And they have a more sharp, brittle top end. These older transformers, paper cores between the windings. So even though it's a transformer and it's like, I don't know, doesn't electricity just go through it? There's still inductance, there's still capacitance between the windings. So old ones are wound with paper bobbins. But I don't think, for a beginner, or for someone who's just been in it a few years, I love those DSP amps. I love the Line 6. I love the Boss Katanas. Because I think the worst part of being the first few years of learning is if you only have one sound and you suck, or you're just past the sucking stage, it can get boring. If you can't play lots of notes or can't do lots of things, you get kind of bored and discouraged a little. With these new amps where you can get a looper in them and you get lots of effects, even if you can only play two notes, you can put a bunch of effects on and make some crazy noises and stuff and entertain yourself for hours. And that keeps you inspired to play the guitar the next day. Easy one, obviously. I mean, if your guitar's set up right and everything, that always helps. But really simple things that a lot of people overlook is string gauge. Billy Gibbons, Van Halen, Yngwie Malmsteen, Angus Young, some of the most revered tones, they're using 7s and 8 and 9 gauge strings. And look, heavy gauge strings may work great for you, and that's good too. But don't be closed-minded. Just try a bunch of different ones. And another one I'm obsessed with, it's kind of funny, probably sad a little, I'm obsessed with guitar picks. I have a ridiculously large collection of guitar picks. And I make lots of my friends, when they come here, play with a different guitar pick, because people just don't realize how much difference that makes to the sound. Everyone just thinks, well, it's just a pick and you just hit. But again, depending on how you hit, like for Gibson's example, I can't play a Gibson. The picks I use, when I hit with my right hand, the A string wobbles out of time and out of tune. I can even see it under an LED light. Like every time I play a Gibson, the A string goes out of tune. It's in tune if you tune it, but the way I hit, you can audibly hear that it's out of tune. If I use a pick that's under 0.7 mil, it stays in tune.
Hopelessly nerdy. Hopelessly.
It is, but that's the best example I can give, because like some people will bring their guitars for a setup and stuff, and like they'll go, oh, it's always this, or it's always, it's not playing right, it doesn't sound right. And then when you see how they play, it's like, oh, hang on a minute, can you just try this? And it's amazing. I'll put a pick in their hand. They're willing to spend hundreds of dollars or thousands to buy a new guitar because they're just like, and you put $1 pick in their hand, like a different one. And it's like, oh, I'm not getting that wobble sound anymore. I'm not getting this or that. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to work for everyone, but it does. Those little simple things. The pickup height, it can be a big thing as well. And people will be like, no, the pickup should be 3 mil from the string. Again, this is art. There's no right or wrong. But if this sound is too attacking, too, not warm and round, your pickups might be too close to the strings. You'll find the higher the pickup goes to the string, the more of the fundamental of the note you get and less harmonics you get. If you lower it down, you'll get more harmonics because the fundamental becomes lower. And that sounds what we call woodier and stuff. So again, somebody will come in and go, oh, I need to get new pickups for this guitar. Why? Oh, it doesn't have enough output and the pickup's down at the pick guard. You just raise it up and it's like, how's that sound? Vice versa. This is too brutal. It's too sharp. To try lowering the pickup and turning the tone knob, there's a lot of repairers will just take your money when there's just simple, cheap things that you can try first. To some degree, valve amps as well. I get a lot of people calling, I just need to service my amp. What's wrong with it? Nothing's wrong with it. All right, then we're done. A valve amp, I mean, I have all the testers here and everything. I can test all the voltages. I can test the currents it's pulling. I can test your tubes. Even if I've tested everything, nothing's going to stop that thing from blowing up in 3 days. For young players, for people just getting into tube amps, it's really good if you actually spend some time and listen to your amp. Like when it's new, is it quiet? Does it hum? Is it just understand what noises your amp makes?
How regularly would you need to service your gear?
Well, the funny thing about electronics is the longer you don't use it, the worse it gets. Okay, so you want to turn your amp on as often as possible. The capacitors and everything like being charged up. So, if you let it sit for years, that's actually worse for it than if you play it every day. But after that, again, it really comes down to listening to the amp. Tubes just aren't made like they used to be. The quality of manufacturing of tubes now is not great, and it's not going to get any better because we're trying to get rid of pollutants, and the making of tubes is horrendously carcinogenic. So it's horrible for humans making them. I mean, literally, tubes manufacturers only give a 90-day warranty on tubes. That should tell you everything. That's it. It's 90 days. You're on your own. So it could be 90 days and it could be 9 years.
The SoundLab ebook, Why Learn Music? A comprehensive guide to the benefits of learning music is out now. We've put decades of music learning concepts in this ebook especially for you. This is a must-read for anyone looking to grow to their full music learning potential. Visit our website to get your free ebook today.
What about with music, the direction where you think it's heading? Are into, at the moment, acoustic instrument sales are obviously booming. What do you think about what's happening with the direction of music?
Yeah, it's funny. You keep hearing guitar's dead and everything. Well, it's been 20 years now that I've been doing this, and it's been really consistent across that time. It's like every 4 to 6 years there's like a whole new group of young people into it, and I just see it over and over. It just keeps repeating. I think now that technology is so good, music's evolving a lot quicker than it did for the 70 years before that, because in the old days only the best bands would get picked to make a record, and then you'd go in and you would spend months on that record and make it some polished thing, and then we'd all get it and try and divulge that album for the next X months. Now it's really exciting, although I do think people, and it's not young people, it's just all people, should spend a little bit more time writing their songs. That's probably my biggest beef of any new music, is that technology is so great that you can come up with so many things, and you can literally come up with different style of music every day, because not only can you record quick, but whether you have plugins or whether you have a Helix, you can get lots of different sounds. There doesn't seem to be any boundaries now. Because, I mean, somebody may put up something on Instagram this morning that I've never heard before, which I love. Like, I love Instagram for that. And then suddenly the rest of my week is trying to figure out how they're doing that, or what is that sound they're playing? Well, like, who else is doing that sort of music? There's so much good stuff out in every genre. What I think is cool, though, I will say, I know I've talked too much, but
that's all right, go.
Western culture is finally getting more girls in. I have a daughter. It's really cool to see lots of female guitarists getting signature models and getting out there and putting their ego up against boys. And it's good. It's good, it's because that alone creates a different style of music because it comes from a different place than all boys, the whole sausage fest.
Well, yeah, and it's a pretty male-dominated industry. I know that growing up with it. Yeah, the sausage fest, as you say. Lots of more girls getting into playing music, which is fantastic. At the SoundLab Music School with our lessons, we've got probably about a 50-50 split between girls and boys. And also it's like girls getting into drums and other things as well, which is really cool.
Yeah. I just thought that girl, that Dave Grohl, like she challenged Dave Grohl to a song or something, and God, she's 10 or she's so small. She's crushing it. I think that's really great. Even a music school was 50-50. I mean, any music school I went to when I was growing up, I don't remember seeing any girl learning guitar. And it's good for the whole industry. Everyone wins from more people playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe you can tell me what you think the benefits of learning music would be in terms of having lessons at the Sound Lab.
Well, I think it's probably a good time, just weirdly, again, so I have a daughter in high school and they're worrying a lot about, for this year, the whole staying home thing, and it's causing a lot of mental health issues. One thing, you just can't get away from the fact that playing an instrument, it gives you an outlet for things that maybe you can't say, maybe you can't talk to your parents about, maybe you just don't think anyone understands. Having an outlet like an instrument, be it guitar, drums, well, if you're upset, drums are really good, but learning an instrument, it could just transport you just somewhere else. Even just, again, that's what the great thing is, like those Boss Katanas or something. When I was growing up, even if I had that stress, I could still only make it sound one way. But now with those amps too, if you want to express yourself a real happy way one day, there's sounds for that. If you're really angry one day, there's sounds for that. So it really helps get those emotions out quicker. Learning an instrument trains your brain in another way, like learning another language. The more you can open up your brain, get it to expand, that's all good there. In today's culture, I think it's more important than ever to have an outlet instead of this crazy social media stuff. Turn it around, learn an instrument, make social media work for you, get your voice out there.
All right, Simon, I'd like to thank you for your time and being in the Sound Lab at home. It's been a pleasure and I look forward to catching up with you real soon.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.
All the best. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you very much. All the best to everyone.
The SoundLab sincerely appreciates your support in watching our content. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more of the SoundLab at home.